Welcome to another edition of the Is Cavalier podcast. It's your boy Mac. Joining me today is one of my favorite NBA content creators and a man that has helped spread the Cavalier gospel through some of his recent content, and that is Alex Hoops. What's going on, brother? How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited to talk some hoops and appreciate that intro.
I got to, man. Anytime somebody goes out of their way, and we have seen this, everybody who's watching this right now has probably seen a lot of your content. And recently you did a couple of pieces on some teams, including the Cavaliers. And I'm very, very appreciative when anybody does that, because this team, although this has been a season in which they've gotten more national coverage than they have since LeBron, it's always refreshing to hear anybody outside of the local media talk about this team. So, Alex, I'm just going to hit you right off the bat. We've seen so many developments from this Cavaliers team this season, whether it be Evan Mobley's offensive growth, to Darius Garland's return to all-star form, to fucking Dean Wade finally getting the respect that he deserves as a defender, to Ty Jerome running away with the opportunity that he has been afforded this season as the leader of the second unit. So my first question for you, my friend, is there anything from an individual standpoint, just as a pure basketball fan, that has stood out to you about what Cleveland has done or as a team or from a specific player this year?
I think one thing that really stands out is it's funny because we talk about like heliocentric offenses. It seems like all the best teams have like somewhat of a heliocentric offense. Like OKC, it's built all around. That team as a whole is insane, but it's built around Shea. Like without Shea, that team is still really, really good, but it's because of Shea that everything else is unlocked and you're able to build that team that way in the first place. You look at last year's Mavericks team where, yes, you had the kind of back and forth of Luka and Kyrie, but it was Luka's team. He was doing the majority of the ball handling. It was built around Luka.
You see that with Cade too in the Pistons this season.
Exactly. Teams, the heliocentric model is the prevailing model in today's NBA, but then you get to the Cavs and it's like it's heliocentric to an extent, but it's not really. It's very the word I've used for offenses where it's like not necessarily just one person doing everything is it's very egalitarian. Like everyone has a similar share of the responsibility, regardless of like, you may be a Max Strus on the wing where you're going to get an open shot, but you need to be able to take that shot, or you need to be able to attack a closeout. You need to be able to put the ball on the floor and do something with it. And like, that's where you see a lot of growth from Evan Mobley. It's like in the past, there was some tentativeness, and I'm sure there were some conversations where it was like, hey, you're really good, but you can't be tentative. You have to do something with the ball when you get it and be ready to put the ball on the floor if you have to. And we've seen that growth this year. It's something that's come to fruition, and it's unlocked a lot, not just for him, but for the whole team. And you have Donovan Mitchell where it's like Donovan Mitchell's kind of the main guy, but he's also not, because it doesn't matter if he goes 2 of 17 because he's got Darius Garland there. He's got Evan Mobley there. He's got Jarrett Allen, who can sometimes go off for 20 plus. It's like no one has to bear the responsibility on any given night, or on every single night throughout the entire season. It's like, yeah, you have guys who are going to pick up the slack here and there. It's a very, well-balanced team, and I really appreciate that in an era of heliocentric offenses.
The Cavaliers in general are no stranger to that, right? No disrespect to JB, who's done a phenomenal job with the Detroit Pistons this season. And we already mentioned that's kind of what they're doing over there in Detroit with Cade. The sun, the moon, the stars, they all orbit around Cade over there most nights. But this Cleveland team this season, it's been a complete 180 in that regard. As you mentioned, we no longer fear Donovan Mitchell going 2 of 19. We no longer fear Darius Garland going completely absent from a night-to-night basis, and that's a whole nother conversation within itself, his return to form. But this team is so much more balanced from an offensive standpoint, and getting everybody involved and making sure that everybody is being utilized to their strengths, and in some ways being used in ways that nobody really envisioned them being used prior to the season being started. That has been what has been so surprising to me. And credit where credit is due when it goes to Kenny Atkinson. The players certainly deserve their fair share of praise in that regard as well. But you just look, man, some of the changes that people were wanting this team to make, because they entered the 2024-25 campaign with largely the same cast of players, the same roster. Basically, they doubled down on it. They said, we're not going to listen to the outside noise. We're going to re-sign all of our core, basically. So they have all these guys locked up: Donovan, Darius, Evan, Mobley. And in terms of the outside noise, there was just so many questions in regards to, can Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell coexist? Can Evan Mobley and Jarrett Allen work long term? It's all they really did this offseason was change up at the coaching level. You brought in guys like Jordan Odd, you brought in Johnny Bryant, DeMarre Carroll, but the biggest move of all was obviously Kenny Atkinson. And to me, that is what has stirred the proverbial drink this season and has given us some of the most aesthetically pleasing basketball that we have seen in the NBA this year, and has the Cavaliers ranked at number 1 from an offensive rating standpoint. All of that in mind, what is it about this offense that has made it the way it has functioned this season? What makes it all work? Is it the way that they've managed to generate their looks? Is it the way in which they've played off of each other? What is it?
I think it's, and I've talked about this elsewhere in videos and on other podcasts, but they're a team where whenever someone says everyone plays the same way in the NBA, or like everyone's just running pick and rolls in the NBA, I'm like, you are not watching the Cleveland Cavaliers, because that couldn't be further from the truth. Like, their offense is very diverse and very unique in the sense that they run a lot of, like, they have a lot of pet actions that they're going to go to consistently, and they're going to go back to the well if it's working and keep using that until you're forced to adjust. And it's a lot of, I've noticed this specifically this year, but it's been more of a trend over the past like 4 or 5 years, but like teams that are consistently running like secondary off-ball actions throughout the entire, not just like in specific instance, like you get to crunch time or you really need a bucket because the other team's going on a run, so we'll bust out a set and see what we can make happen instead of running like more improvisational basketball. Teams that are consistently running plays and prepared offense throughout the entirety of a game, those are the teams that typically have the best offense, because it's improvisational basketball where it's like just driving and kicking. The Cavs do that, but they don't just do that. It's like they're driving and kicking, having like 5-out spread pick and roll, but they're also going to be running like a pin down on the weak side, or they're going to be running a flare screen for Max Strus, or they're going to open up the possession with a wide pin down for Strus and Allen to get into a pick and roll. And then all of a sudden you've got Garland and Mitchell being able to be second side creators after a kick out. It's like teams that do that are the teams that have the best offenses, because that is so much harder to guard than just like standard pick and roll defense where you're just kind of living with a team shooting mid-range shots. And the thing I've always said when people talk about the 3-point shooting in today's NBA, where they're like, their teams are taking too many threes, Celtics take too many threes, the Cavs take too many threes, I'm like, I don't buy that. I think people look at the result of a possession, they see, oh, this possession ended in a 3, and they ignore how that 3 was created. Open threes, specifically corner threes, are the byproduct of a good offense. It's not like teams are just sitting down and saying, well, we need to generate an open 3, so that's all. We're only going to shoot open 3s, and if we can't get an open 3, then we're just going to, have a shot clock violation. It's like these teams are shooting a ton of 3s because that's what they're really good at generating, because they can get 2 on the ball. They can generate a paint touch. They can get down low and force that weak side help. They have to have, Donovan Mitchell, such a good pull-up 3-point shooter that he's going to come off a screen. Most of the time, teams are going to send a double. Mobley or Allen's going to roll to the basket. They're going to send a tag. And Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are guys who are going to hit that skip pass every single time. And it turns out that's really hard to stop. It's like, yeah, of course they're taking a ton of 3s because teams are giving them open 3s. Like, take the shot that people always say, guys got to let the game come to them. And that's what the Cavs do. They just, every player on this team lets the game come to them. I don't want to say no one's forcing anything ever. Sometimes, things get forced here and there, but more often than not, one of the reasons they've been so successful is that they don't force things. Everything is within the flow of the game and everything makes sense.
Yeah, make no mistake. We have seen Donovan try and force it when he's been in slumps, but that has happened far less frequently this season. Even when he has been in a slump, he has leaned into other aspects of his game. Most recently, you've seen him really lean into that playmaking where he's just getting everybody involved. But I got to tell you, Alex, one of the things that I have been very much impressed with, and we saw this last season, it's been Max's his DHO work with both Evan, but especially Jarrett. He has 42 assists to Jarrett Allen this season, and a lot of those he is finding Jarrett cutting to the basket. It's not just alley oops; it's just perfectly timed pocket passes, some skip passes out there. And even when Jarrett does not have a good and makeable shot at the rim, he is so good at catching that pass and then rerouting it off the short roll to somebody else out on the perimeter. And I say all this to say the Kenny Atkinson offense has just shown us that there are options upon options upon options. If the initial pick and roll, if there's things that are not, if the possession is not going the way that Cleveland doesn't want it to go, they can pivot quickly to something else. And they're getting out early enough in the shot clock on many of these possessions, which was a huge issue last season where they were getting into their offensive sets way too slow, and they were letting a lot of the clock burn off, leading to one of the slower paced offenses in basketball. It's just been completely different this season. And so that has been very impressive. Now, to be honest with you, man, anybody who watched this team over the last 4 or 5 seasons could tell you that the team's biggest issues laid on the offensive end. We already knew what the defense was, but most of the issues that they had laid on the offensive end, and they were not going to take that next step towards becoming a legitimate title contender without becoming much, much more of an offensive threat to teams, many of which in the ways you already kind of mentioned. That was not going to happen without becoming less predictable. And at the heart of it all, to have a successful offense in the modern NBA, in my opinion, you got to be able to knock down those triples, obviously, but you got to be able to score within the painted area as well. Something that OKC and his fans, including yourself, know very well. We'll talk about them in a minute. But Cleveland this season, they are obviously number one in three-point percentage at 38.4% and fourth in attempts at 41.3%. That's a huge leap from where they were last year at 36.7%, which ranked middle of the pack at 15th, and 36.8 attempts, which was 8th. They've been dismantling opponents from inside that painted area and from the mid-range. And per cleaning the glass, they rank 6th at 68.8% shots at the rim, which is all shots from 4 feet and within. They were 18th in that area last year. They are first in all mid-range looks, up from 13th last year. They are first in short mid-range looks, which was up from 14th. And I know this is all a mouthful, but I remain impressed with how this team has so quickly pivoted from where they were last year in terms of efficiency. And to me, one of the most underrated areas that Cleveland can hurt you in is with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell's ability to attack you and break you down and beat the drop coverage, in which they do in a number of ways. Can you just speak to how you think they'll be able to do that in the postseason?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel like, we can look at the playoff woes that Darius Garland has had, but there's been, there's other factors that I think you can attribute some of that to. So I lean towards giving him the benefit of the doubt. But like, their game is a game that is playoff resilient. Yeah, Donovan Mitchell can go cold, but I think the passing is in such a good spot right now that and I think it was last year too. I think Donovan Mitchell generally has been a very underrated passer over the last couple of years, an overall playmaker. But you look at the fact that both him and Darius Garland are able to break a defense down, regardless of the defensive coverage. Like, you talk about, you drop against Donovan Mitchell, he could burn you with threes, but say you throw that double at him. Like, one thing that Donovan Mitchell does, I think, potentially better than any other guard in the NBA except maybe Steph Curry and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, is split defenders when they jump out at him coming off of a screen. Like, if you're blitzing Donovan Mitchell, he's not really thinking about he can make that pass over the top of 2 defenders, but more often than not, he's splitting those defenders And all of a sudden, you've got like a 4-on-3 or a 4-on-2. It's like you're going to generate an open look that way. And that's something that doesn't go away in the playoffs. The ability to create those opportunities, to create those half-court numbers advantages, that just doesn't disappear. And you have to play really disciplined defense against that. And there's not a ton of teams, especially in the Eastern Conference, that have disciplined enough of a defense to handle that through a 7-game series. It's just not going to happen. And the same goes for Darius Garland. Obviously, I think physically Mitchell is more equipped to handle, the theoretical increased physicality of the playoffs, something that everyone always talks about. Defenses are allowed to play a little bit more in the playoffs. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not actually true. It kind of just depends on the series. But Darius Garland, the fact that he's healthy now, I think will fix a lot of that. And he's shifty enough and able to maneuver through traffic well enough that I think, even if teams are playing him physical, that passing ability is not going to go away. The ability to get two on the ball isn't going to go away. And I'm really excited to see a playoff series where both of these guys are healthy now, and we are able to see the full extent of this team in the postseason. I think we're going to see teams that they run into have to get really creative with how they handle these two, because there's just not really a lot you can do that hasn't already been tried and hasn't already not worked. It's like teams have tried to slow them down, but there's only so much you can do. The ceiling on this offense is just so high, and the floor is so high. I mean, there's not many answers that we've seen yet. A lot of teams are trying to figure it out still.
Yeah, I mean, Donovan, he is excellent at splitting that double, and he's a very athletic finisher at the rim. Darius kind of does it in a different way, right? We've seen him utilize that hostage dribble a lot, which has led to some beautiful floaters from him, as well as some of the mid-range stuff, which is attributed to the Cavaliers' efficiency in terms of the mid-range looks overall. But yeah, you just look at the options they have. You can even throw Ty Jerome in there because he's been excellent in terms of that floater, ranking within the 100th percentile per B-ball index and floater talent. But yeah, it's insane what this man Ty Jerome has been able to do this season. Is there, when you look at Ty specifically coming into this season, was he even on your radar as a guy that could potentially look like a 6-man of the year candidate?
Not only do I think so to answer your question, no, he wasn't on my radar at all. Like zero. Not even the smallest little blip. I think this year, not only does he deserve serious 6-man of the year consideration, I think he has as good a case as anybody to win it. But I also think like most improved player, absolutely. Like he used to be on the Thunder way long ago.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5 years ago that he was on the Thunder, and I'll be honest, I watched him and I was like, yeah, I thought he was a good player. He was a good player in college, but I was never really watching him in OKC being like, this guy's going to be a long contributor in the NBA. I was like, oh, he's, he'll probably have a 1 or 2 contract career, and then, he'll probably slowly phase out and, 10-day here, and then slowly, move on from the NBA, whatever the next step would be. But now the fact that he's playing as good as he is on, a team that I think is going to make it out of the East, it's like insane, the development. I think he embodies to me the spirit of most improved player. Like I think players like Ty Jerome are what that award should be, where no one saw this coming. Everyone had written you off. And then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I get he's not starting. I get he's not necessarily all-star caliber numbers, but he's improved to a 6-man of the year candidate on one of the best teams in the NBA and one of the best offenses that we've seen in a long time. It's like, yeah, he is the most improved player to me.
Dude's playing 19.7 minutes per game, Alex. It's crazy the level of production. He's just missing the 50-40-90 club. He was just in it, but last couple of games kind of taking him out. That being said, I guess to kind of shift gears here in the conversation of most improved, do you think we need to completely change the way and shift the gears on how we view that award and who should be qualifying for it based upon draft slots and other categories?
For me, the most improved player award has always been about expectation. And I think The problem with it right now is people are kind of ignoring expectation and just looking at like the numbers. Like Cade Cunningham is the favorite to win it right now. And I love Cade Cunningham. I'm super, super impressed with his development. I think there was so much discussion about, can he be your franchise player? Can he be your first option? Can you build a team around him? I'm like, turns out, yes, you can. No doubt about it. I think the Pistons like acknowledge that now. And I think Pistons fans and NBA fans acknowledge that. But I think there was kind of this overcorrection where they're like, well, he deserves most improved player now. It's like, no, he's an all-star. Like, he was the first overall pick. We expected him to do this. And, you know, if you were just a patient NBA fan, like you should be, especially with guards point guards take a while to develop. Look at Scoot Henderson, for example. It's like, these guys aren't good overnight.
Look at how people are looking at Darius Garland in year one. Exactly.
And I get Cade's in his fourth year, so some people are like, well, he's not a third-year player, he's in his fourth year, so he should be like a MIP favorite. But it kind of is Cade's third year, because he had that 1 year where he was injured. He played only 12 games, I believe. So I think when the expectation, especially from a number one overall pick, when the expectation is that you're going to be an all-star, and nobody should get it twisted. The expectation when Cade Cunningham was drafted was that he was going to be an all-star. He was going to be a superstar. I remember during that whole season leading up to him being drafted, there was the hashtag fade for Cade. Every team wanted Cade Cunningham. Everyone wanted to be the one that drafted Cade. And I understand, because the expectation was he was going to be a superstar. If you just were patient, turns out he is. But that doesn't mean we give him MIP now. Like, that's not what the award historically has been. And I think it's more of a recent development that we've been like when Ja Morant won it. I am someone who doesn't think that Ja Morant really embodied the spirit of what MIP is supposed to be. Ja Morant was the second overall pick. But the argument was the hardest leap for a player to make is from all-star to superstar. And I think that's ridiculous. I can listen to that argument where you say the hardest leap to make is all-star to superstar, but that doesn't mean you should win MIP. That's still, to me, not what the award embodies. It's not the spirit of the award. And I just think the award either needs to be reworked in terms of its criteria, but it's such a subjective thing that it's like, how would you even rework it? But the track record is getting really spotty with it. The fact that Cade is the betting favorite to win MIP is ridiculous. And I'm somebody who thinks he's all NBA worthy this year. So it's like, I'm not hating on him. I just don't think he should get the award.
I'm right there with you, man. It's very, very hard to probably quantify and add the proper context in each and every season, because every season is different. There's new storylines. There's players who make massive leaps every season, and there are guys who are deserving of that award that get bypassed every single year. I look at right now the season that Norman Powell is having, and I'm like, how does a guy like that not, how isn't he the favorite? How isn't Ty Jerome up higher than he is? And there are other names that you can throw in there as well. But yeah, I think that award needs to be looked at in terms of how people qualify it. But I'm going to shift gears here again, because I heard you mention something, and that is that you believe this team is the favorite to come out of the East. So I'm just going to say this. As of recording this video, the Boston Celtics have won 56 games and are just 4 games back of the Cavs for first in the East, and could still technically catch them, I guess, if Cleveland isn't careful. That said, Boston and Cleveland have split that regular season series 2-2, with basically all 4 matchups being pretty tightly contested. Cleveland is the number one offensive rated basketball team in basketball at 121.5. Boston is a very close second at 119.6. Boston is fifth in defensive rating at 110.2, while Cleveland is also top 10 at 111.9. Cleveland is first in points per game at 122.3. Boston is eighth. Cleveland is first in 3-point percentage. Boston is eighth. And there are just so many metrics, man, and stats that paint the Cavs as the better team. But all of that said, all of this boils down in the minds of many pundits, fans, and analysts alike. Can they do it in the playoffs? Can they do it when it matters most? And dog, I'm just going to say this. First and foremost, I'm a Cavs fan, so sometimes I suffer from this issue of being and falling victim to wearing the white and gold tinted glasses when it comes to seeing things objectively. in terms of some of these bigger matchups. So as an objective observer, I'm going to appreciate your honesty and opinion heavily right now. All that said, have you seen enough from this Cleveland Cavaliers team this season as a collective that would make you think that they are ready to actually dethrone the Boston Celtics at the top of the East?
So I will include the caveat just to cover my bases because it is worth saying, but whenever we talk about the regular season and a team being great in the regular season, everyone's like, we need to see them do it in the playoffs. People are saying it about the Thunder. Yeah. I think that's totally fair. You do need to see a team do it in the playoffs, but we have to go off the evidence that we have from this regular season, and we can't act like the regular season is meaningless. I think we're totally, we've completely lost the plot if everyone just acts like it's ridiculous. It's one of my least favorite things about the NBA is the way the regular season is viewed. It's gotten better over the years, but it's still not great. With the Cavs, I just think this year I've really tried over the entire season to keep finding reasons why I can talk myself out of them, where I'm like, well, maybe Isaac Okoro hasn't really improved as a three-point shooter. Or maybe Evan Mobley really hasn't improved that much as a offensive piece and consistently being able to contribute. Or maybe Max Strus will start cooling off from three and go back to more of that like 33% where it's like you're a shooter, but you're not really a shooter. And as I've waited for all of these things to happen, they haven't happened. And meanwhile, something that I think kind of flies under the radar is like Donovan Mitchell isn't really even having like his best season by his standards. Like last season, I think by a lot of metrics, he was probably a better player. But within the context of what the Cavs have done this year, it's like, no, they are still this good in spite of the fact that Donovan Mitchell hasn't been the player that he was last year. Whether, we can talk about whether that's a byproduct of how the team operates right now. I don't necessarily think it is. I think is more likely he's just having, a down year, which isn't to say that he hasn't been great. He's still been great. I've run out of things, and this kind of happened to me with OKC, since, I'd say since the trade deadline, both of these teams, I just kind of gave up looking for things to talk myself out of them. I was like, yeah, you're both just insanely good teams, and you're both probably going to be in the finals. And meanwhile, the Celtics are still an elite basketball team. I still think they are a top 3 team in basketball easily. But there's just a lot of things with the Celtics that can go wrong. You've got like Kristaps Porzingis. I think, they need Porzingis. Last year they were able to get by a little bit with Porzingis not being healthy. I think this year they need Porzingis to be healthy if they run into the Cavs. If, somehow things just go the complete wrong way for the Cavs and the Celtics don't have to play the Cavs in the postseason, then, they could probably get by without Porzingis. But if they run into the Cavs, they're going to need Porzingis. I don't think they'll be able to. That's a bridge too far for me. And the Cavs just have more to work with. I think the Cavs have the versatility to match Boston, and that's kind of the thing with Boston. It's like everyone's going to shoot, everyone's going to put the ball on the floor, everyone's going to be in the right spot at the right time, and everyone can defend. In the past, you could kind of say with Cleveland, well, everyone can defend, but not everyone can shoot. Or there's lineups where everyone can shoot, but not everyone can defend. Or we'll have guys who, maybe aren't the most desirable defenders out there and we can't always cover for them. But now it's like they have the personnel that they need to match what Boston does. And I've always said to beat Boston, you need to be Boston. You have to play how they play. You have to try and outscore them. You have to, keep up with their shooting. If they get hot, you got to get hot. And you have to have the personnel to get hot. And you have to have the shooters that are willing to take those shots in the first place. And not only do I think that Cleveland now has the offensive personnel to keep up with that, I think their defense does a good job of keeping Boston in check. And in Boston, they haven't been a perfect team this year like you could argue they were last year. I mean, last year they were one of the most perfect basketball teams I've watched in a long time in the postseason, where it's like, yeah, they're just going to have moments where they'll score 20 points in 2 minutes and there's just nothing you can do about it. Sorry. And I think you can say that for Cleveland this year, where there's so many Cavs games that I've watched this year where they'll be like tied with a team through the first quarter and a half, and I'll look down at my phone for like 3-4 minutes of game time, and I'll look back up, it's halftime and they're up by 20. And I'm like, when you play like that, you can beat anybody. And that's what you have to do to beat Boston. You have to have that firepower and enough defensive firepower to just like win on the margins a little bit. And I think that's the story of the Cavs is they've got the high octane offense that you need, and they can win on the margins. That's something they do very, very well.
Yeah, I mean, they have scored 120 or more 43 times this season. That is insane. They've scored 130 19 times. They've cracked 144 times. Like this team can get and catch fire at the drop of a hat, and we know what they are all about defensively. And I honestly, I got to be honest with you, man. Coming into this season, I was wondering to myself, okay, Kenny Atkinson is a much more offensive-minded head coach than JB Bickerstaff. And I was wondering, is this team going to lose a little bit of something defensively? And it just hasn't seemed to feel that way. Then offensively, they've just kind of changed and shifted the way that they do things and the way that they operate. But in terms of Boston, yeah, I felt even last season, I felt had the Cavaliers been able to stay healthy, they probably don't win that series, but at the very least, they make it a lot more of a challenge than it was. This season, I feel like that gap is all but been erased due to what they've been able to do. And it only continued to close once they acquired DeAndre Hunter, which that trade is a whole nother discussion.
I haven't even mentioned. Yeah, we haven't said a single thing about him yet.
It's crazy. Like you forget that this team is just stacked. You got Ty Jerome doing what he's doing. You got Darius, Garland, Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, Jarrett Allen, who've all been phenomenal in their own right. And then you acquire DeAndre Hunter, a fellow 6-man of the year candidate in his own right, who will probably come up very, very big in the playoffs. But yeah, I got to be honest with you, man. I know that you are obviously an Oklahoma City Thunder fan, and I know that the Boston Celtics loom large in the Eastern Conference. But if it's one team in the entire NBA that scares me, or at the very least I got to watch closely, it is definitely OKC. They own the NBA's highest current net rating at a staggering 13.2, if I'm not mistaken, which is like 4 higher than the next closest team.
Yeah.
They are number 1 in defensive rating, number 3 in offensive rating. They take care of the basketball, turning it over just 11.9 times per contest, which is second in the NBA. They have tremendous individual and team defenders. They got very good shooters at their disposal. Oh, and they got a top 3 player in the league right now in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Now, again, I know you're a fan of the Thunder, so I got to ask this, objectively speaking. If you are sitting in Mark Daigneault's chair, how would you go about defeating Cleveland in the event that they do face off in a 7-game series? What weaknesses would you look to exploit in a playoff setting if you are Mark?
So I've talked about this a little bit before, and I think you can say, I think we're going to see just about any team in the NBA do this when it comes to Cleveland, but they're going to get the ball out of Darius, Garland, and Donovan Mitchell's hands. I think that's just a given. And that's kind of the blueprint that we see with most teams who have star guards. They try to get the ball out of their hands, and they'll throw as much defense as they can and force the weakest link on whoever else is on the floor, make them score, make them be the offense. So I think not just when it comes to OKC. With OKC, it's almost hard to say what they would do because, I mean, I was watching them play the Bulls last night, and they were throwing out some junk defense where I was like, I have never seen this in my life. I don't know what this is.
And then Isaiah Joe drills 8 triples on.
Yeah, stuff like that. I'm just like, I don't know what you're supposed to do, man. When Isaiah Joe's having a career night and he goes off for 31 points, something like that, I don't really know what you're supposed to do. But as far as defending Cleveland, I think we'll see teams try and make Evan Mobley like really be an offensive engine. That's probably a bit too bold of a word to use, but I think they're going to get the ball out of Garland and Mitchell's hands and make everyone else be the offense, try and take those guys out of it as much as they can. That being said, the success of that approach, I question a little bit just because I think Cleveland's gotten creative enough with how they use Mobley and Allen and even like Max Strus and all the different things that they have at their disposal. It's like, yeah, say you've got Garland on the wing, and you've got the pass to him blocked off with a defender, and then you've got two defenders on Mitchell. They're forcing the ball out of his hands, so you pass it to Mobley, and like Max Strus is in the corner. Cleveland normally is just having Strus come up and get a handoff from Mobley or Allen or whoever that big is, and they'll just get into a pick and roll, and all of a sudden the offense develops from there. So it's like, yes, you do kind of make Mobley have to be like super on at all times, where he's like got to make those split second decisions where it's like, okay, you get the pass, the double was on Mitchell, we got to get into a dribble handoff, or you got to throw it to Strus in the corner, and then you guys get into an empty side pick and roll or something like that. He's going to have to be really dialed in because I think a lot of Cleveland's offense is going to develop out of those situations where Garland and Mitchell may not be able to touch the ball until like 15, 16, 17 seconds are off the shot clock. So it's important that Mobley and Allen and Strus are willing and ready, and not just them, whoever the bench guys are on the floor, like DeAndre Hunter, Ty Jerome, Dean Wade, like those guys need to be ready as well to probably have more touches in some of these series, especially in a final series. OKC is not going to let Garland and Mitchell have their way. They're going to make you as uncomfortable as possible because that's what they do. They show you stuff you haven't had to deal with a ton before. But all that is to say, I look at Cleveland as an OKC fan, and I look at some of the matchups. I know the Thunder had there were a couple of games. Cleveland's what's the record this year? They've played 3 times, right?
Twice.
Yeah. So I know OKC like blew Cleveland out in one of them, and then the other one, I honestly don't remember who won, but I remember it being a close game.
Yeah.
And Cleveland, to me, it's like we look at a team like the Pacers where it's like they're all offense. So yes, on any given night they could drop like, what did they score against the Wizards? Like 169 points or something like that.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
Something stupid. It's like, that doesn't scare me really that much, because it's like, well, yeah, you can't really defend. Like the Wizards still dropped like 115 points or something like that, which isn't great, but it's like, you let the Wizards score 115 points, you should be embarrassed. With Cleveland, it's like they're doing that offense while still defending. And it's not necessarily been as big of an issue this year, but size still does cause problems for OKC. And so that's probably my biggest fear, is just like, is OKC we've seen that during the regular season that size hasn't been as big of an issue, especially when Chet and Isaiah Hartenstein have been healthy. But in the postseason, when you're playing an Isaiah Joe with a bit more physicality, you're playing an Aaron Wiggins with a bit more physicality, you're playing a Dort with more physicality, you're playing Chet with more physicality. How do those guys deal with that? Does that fluster them? Does that take them out of their rhythm? And I think Cleveland's just really good at taking guys out of their rhythm, and that's something that from a Thunder fan's perspective concerns me.
Oh, I appreciate the honesty in that regard, man. Now I gotta put you on the spot here before we get out of here. I gotta, I guess, a funny little question for you, but before that,
right,
a little bit of context. SGA, as we all know, is the league's leading scorer at 32.8 points per game. He's done that despite being outside of the top 40 in terms of three-pointers made. Dude's been an absolute assassin from the mid-range area, where he ranks second to only DeMar DeRozan in total mid-range field goals with 167 on a staggering 50.9%, which is third among players with at least 200 attempts. But he's absolutely been able to shut shit down at the charity stripe, where he's knocked down a league-leading 580 free throw attempts this season. It's a whopping 118 more than the next closest player, which is James Harden at 462 as of recording this. I say all that to say, I preface this question with this. Objectively speaking, would you call SGA a free throw merchant? I have to ask you that.
So I saw a tweet floating around yesterday that I thought made me think a little bit, because I love Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I love the Thunder. He's an amazing player. He does some foul baiting that I consider unethical.
Is
Like
it
I say that
is it
kind
Trae
of
Young level grifting?
right. I love Shea, but yes, it is like I jokingly agree with the use of the word unethical there, where it's like that's not. People are like that's not basketball. I'm like, yeah, it's not really basketball, but I understand why he's doing it. I do agree with this tweet I saw yesterday, though. It said Shea is free throw additive and not free throw dependent.
Okay.
I think Shea is capable of doing what he does. You know, we can argue whether or not he'd still be a 32 point per game scorer without with a lower number of free throws. I'll listen to that, but I think his game is like there is only so much you can, because you look at the finishing that he's able to do at the rim, even outside of like the foul drawing and stuff, and it's like he's one of the craftiest finishers I've seen in a long time. And this is like Shea's very athletic in a different way, where it's like he's not super fast, he's not jumping out of the gym, but like the maneuverability that he has, like the mobility that he has, the like proprioception that he has, it's a different type of athleticism, but it's still athleticism. And it's one of the things that makes him so good, and his ability to create a shot for himself in the mid range, especially in areas where he's got like 3 defenders within 5 or 6 feet of him. It's like, I don't really know how he's able to do it so consistently, so effectively. Like, it's one thing to be a good mid-range shooter. It's an entirely different thing to be a 50% mid-range shooter.
It's insane.
People need to understand when we talk about mid-range shooting, like anyone who's like below 44% from mid-range, they're not a very good mid-range shooter. League average is like 42%. Even being 44%, it's like, well, we'd rather these be shots at the rim or shots from 3 from an effectiveness standpoint. To be a 50% shooter in the mid-range is like, this is effective enough that teams actually game plan for it. Teams go from, oh, we'll live with a mid-range shot, to being like, oh, we actually don't want to give up a mid-range shot, which is super unusual in today's NBA. So to answer your question, yes, the free throw stuff, it's frustrating sometimes. I get frustrated watching it, especially when I see something happen during a game and I'm like, that's going to be clipped on Twitter. People are going to lose their minds about this. And I'm like, oh, I hate that I have to like, it doesn't take away from how amazing it is, but it makes it harder for people to appreciate how amazing he is. And that's something that, you know, bums me out a little bit, because I'm like, I want everyone to celebrate how great my point guard is, but I also understand it's like same thing with James Harden for so many years. It's a lot of people acknowledge how great he is now, but no one could kind of see the forest for the trees when it came to his greatness earlier on in his career, where it's like, yeah, everyone just hated the foul baiting. And I'm like, I get it. I hated the foul baiting too. But now I'm like 5 or 6 years removed from it, and I'm like, man, James Harden in 2017 was nuts. Like, that's one of the craziest offensive seasons I've ever seen. But yeah, he's not as dependent as other guys are. But I do think we'll see if some of the free throw stuff gets taken away from him in the postseason. I think we'll see he's still going to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, we have seen people discuss the way in which he could potentially be a reft, I guess maybe the best word, between now and the regular season and the postseason. But one thing I do find it at the very least important to contextualize is the fact that SGA has driven the ball 1,462 times this season. That is 300 more times than the next closest player, which happens to be Trae Young. You know, Cade Cunningham's up there. Cade Cunningham is up there too. But anytime you are driving that much and you're having so many attempts around the rim, you are bound to draw more free throw attempts than the majority of folks that are doing that. So conversely, I can see where maybe the fouls, the calls that he is receiving, they are somewhat justifiable. I just think that people look at the number of pure free throw attempts that he has and just kind of lump it into, oh, well, he's foul baiting. He's trying to draw as many fouls as he can, which we know in today's NBA that works. You know, credit to the guys that utilize it to their advantage, but I'm not going to use that to disparage him. I very much just from objectively speaking, I appreciate the season that he is having, and we'll see if he wins MVP. That said, man, I appreciate you for hopping on such short notice.
For sure, man. I had a great time. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm excited for this postseason, man. It's gonna be fun.
I can't wait. Hopefully the Cavs and Thunder can meet. We'll see.
That is my dream matchup. I want it so bad. And I'm an OKC fan. I want them to win, but if the Cavs were to, sadly beat OKC, I'd be like, all right. And I went to University of Louisville, so I love Donovan Mitchell, and I've been preaching the Darius Garland agenda forever. So if they won a championship, I'd be all right with that.
You never hear that from opposing people who cover their, that don't cover the Cavs, or you just never hear that. So that's refreshing to hear. That's pretty awesome. As I always tell you guys, if you'd like to reach out, you know how you can. It's Cavalier_pod on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more. If you want to be added to the It's Cavalier Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot, send a review to itscavalier53@gmail.com, and I will send you said invite. That said, go Cavs.